Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I'm delighted to welcome back Kathy Dayan. Hello, Kathy.
Hello, Anna. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, it's always great to speak with you, particularly because I don't get the chance to read many novels. And here is another one of yours called Bridge Jumping.
Yeah.
So tell us about bridge jumping. What is it about?
Well, it's about this young woman. She's 40 years old and she passes of liver cancer, and she has left directions for her cremated ashes to be divided into 12 vials. And she wants all the people who are closest to her to have the opportunity to take a vial of her ashes and bring it to a place that honors the relationship that they shared. And she's got a certain spiritual outlook, and all the characters in this book have a slightly different way of seeing things, either their religious convictions or their spiritual outlooks. And we find as we go through the book that it follows each of them with their vial, where they go and why they go there. And they're speaking about Paige, is the name of the protagonist. They're speaking about Paige and how they viewed her and how they felt about her and why, and also why they went to the particular places that they go to bring the ashes. And in between each one of those chapters, there are journal entries that were written by Paige when she was still alive, and so we get to see her perspectives as well. And for me, the interesting part is looking at how our spiritual beliefs influence our lives, the choices we make. And in this case, how they influence, where these people want to bring these ashes. For instance, she has her dad's new wife is very religious, and she thinks they need to go to the cemetery. She's doesn't like the fact that she's been cremated, and so she pours the ashes on Paige's mother's grave. And just as an example, but it's really like looking at perspective and how that is affected based on religion and spirituality.
I really like the way that you've done that. It's wonderfully effective. You really get a sense of who Paige was, but also it's so lovely to see the different perspectives that everybody has. So, what is it that prompted you to write a book that seems to have as its aim the presentation of different perspectives?
Well, I've had different perspectives throughout my life. And for me, it's been, I believe there is a spiritual evolution, for, humanity. And I think personally for myself, I can see that. But as a young child, I was raised Catholic, and I was drawn to ritual. And even very as soon as I could read, I'm reading these little books about different things and Christianity and all kinds of things. And I actually wanted to be a priest when I was a little girl. So I was really fascinated by it. And you know it didn't take very long for me to move away from the Catholic Church, just because when I started to understand some of the beliefs that I held, that I feel intuitively are very different from the beliefs that they're based upon. So my life has really evolved in a different direction, and I'm a medium now, and I, communicate with souls who are on the spirit side of life, and that has changed my perspective on everything. And that's really, I'd have to say, is what sort of opened up that idea of, we're all here, all these souls here on earth, and we all have different ways of seeing things, which is really a lovely thing, I think. But we also need to find a way to find common ground, because we're, hurting each other, and we're not, this is a, it seems to be almost like underlined in this point in time, how our differences are clashing against each other. And there's got to be ways, even within our own family and friends, to find ways to find common ground.
Coming back to your own journey,
Hmm.
because you are a medium, and it seems to be that it's a progression of exploration. And I was very curious about your desire to be a priest when you were a child.
Uh,
What was it about the the priesthood in particular that drew you?
I've always felt comfortable with the idea of God. Like I was very small, and I remember being maybe 3 or 4 and asking my mom, like, who made God? And she wasn't sure how to answer the question, and I was just very intrigued by the idea, and I felt comfortable with having some kind of closeness. I was very into prayer and just being quiet with myself. And I had woods behind me, and I love that. And it's just funny to look back because now I think that those quiet moments of really meditation or meditative times in our lives are what kind of draw us closer to that source. And for me, it's God, it's great spirit, it's source energy, it's all these things, and people define it in different ways and give it different names, but it's this feeling of connection for me. And I think I was feeling some of that as a young child. And then as I got older and I had my own rocky path, and my rocky path kind of opened me up again. I was an alcoholic as a very young woman, and I got sober in my 20s, and I've been sober since. And it's almost like within a year of being sober, I started having these clairvoyant dreams about past lives, and all kinds of things were coming to me. And I think it opened me up in a way that I needed.
Well, that's such an interesting description of what that meant to you when you were a little girl. And because I asked the question, knowing that as a child you wouldn't have understood entirely what being a priest was. So what was it, I wondered, which aspect of it? And I think what I hear coming from you is that desire to be, maybe in the child's mind, to be holy, which really is about that closeness to spirit. And so here you are as a medium having exactly that closeness to spirit. And I think it's interesting too, because throughout history, the holy man, the holy woman was seen as the mediator between the person, the average person, and God. And so there you were, I think, craving that ability to be close. And here you are as a medium. And what do mediums do? It's mediate, or
Uh,
it's because you're communicating, it's a mediate form of mediation between those who are in spirit and those who are in this particular dimension. So that wish,
hmm.
girl, came true. Now, you were talking about the alcoholism as well. And I guess that made me curious because I think there is a strong link. This is my therapist's hat now, between addiction to substances that are mind altering and the desire to connect with something, even though we don't know that that's what we're wanting to do if we're lost in that world of addiction. But it's that sense of meaninglessness and the sense of disconnection from something that means that we get lost in these addictions. So I wonder, with you being clearly a very sensitive child, whether looking back you can see a reason for that addiction.
That's a very interesting way of saying it, to talk about connection, because, I think I was self-medicating. Maybe every addict will say that. I don't know. But I started when I was 11 years old. I started drinking. And so I really was a child, and, experimented with a lot of drugs, but alcohol was really the thing that was killing me. And it brought this interesting duality, because I was terrified of death when I was sick with alcoholism, and I was killing myself literally, by drinking. And so it was this tug of war, and just blanking out. By the end, I just wanted to like blank out. And, you know, after I got sober, it was, as you mentioned, it's like it's you sort of start to push aside the cloudiness of thought that you've had for such a very long time. So for me, I was 26, so it was a long time of pouring the substance in. And as I started to get on that path that felt clearer to me, it was really one step at a time. I mean, it really was. And but then I started to be able to accept some things, and my sensitivity has always been, I think very high. It's hard to compare. Maybe everybody is that sensitive. I don't know, but things painful, and I also, like, shortly after I get sober, I lost my mom, and that was just the hardest thing, and I was a couple years sober when she passed away. And looking back, even shortly after that happened, I thought, like, that's the best thing I ever did in my life, is I could show up for my mom. It was the first time in years that I had any kind of pride in who I was, or my actions, because I just looked down on I was very ashamed of what I had become. And I knew, like, every day I showed up to be with my mom, and that was the one thing that I was able to give her, because she was a phenomenal mother. She was wonderful to me, and luckily, I had that opportunity to be with her after I get sober.
That's quite a journey again, and I think grief and shame play such a large part in
Mm,
addiction. And and when we are lost in those difficult, dark emotions, we what we experience is disconnection, because we disconnect ourselves from those who care about us. It's like a veil that gets between those who care about us, because we are convinced that nobody could possibly care about us.
yes.
um, and then, of course, anything else, for those who have a belief in something else, that too is gone. Because how could anybody, now we've got guilt and shame, and the expectation of punishment, perhaps, added to it, so it becomes quite a difficult thing. So it's wonderful to hear how you were able to reestablish connection,
Mm.
first with your mother, and then comes connection with something bigger as well. When did the mediumship begin? Was it after your mother's passing?
No, but I was having some dreams, because I remember having a dream right after she passed, where I saw her. We were at this little shop in town, where I grew up, and she said, Kathy, it's just the way you said it was going to be, and she was on the other side. And I was like, I woke up and thought, I really felt like I just talked to my mom. And now looking back, I'm sure I did. I was trying to support her as she was passing. She had a brain tumor, so she had moments of coherence and moments of not coherence. And I had this very strong feeling. I remember saying to her that nothing could be stronger than the love we have for each other. Like that's where that surfaced during my mom's illness, the idea of love is stronger than death. And that was the kind of thing I was saying to her. So she said, it's just the way you said it was. And, so that was, I didn't think of myself as having clairvoyant dreams or anything in that point. It was just supporting me to have those. It made me keep putting one foot in front of the other, but with time, I became very interested in mediumship. Particularly, I lost one of my sisters, and it was very sudden and very shocking. And we were all kind of, just trying to get our arms around what had happened. And she came to me, my sister came to me in a dream, and it was so real. I mean, I saw her walking in, and she sat on my bed, and, we had a conversation. And there were two people with her. As I was watching, there were spirit guides, but I couldn't see their faces. And I may have told you this in the last interview, I'm not sure, but we had a conversation, and I could see myself having the conversation at the same time I was having it. And, you know, when we finished it, she stood up and she walked out through the wall of my house out, and these two guides went out with her. And I started searching after that. And going to the spiritualist church was the first thing that happened. My husband had heard about it, and he went to one, and he got a reading from my sister. My sister came through and said something that turned out to be quite true for him, and that gave me faith. And so it was like, without dragging you through my whole life, these are the kinds of things that really sparked my interest and brought me back to this point of just really wanting to be spiritually connected. And once I got there, I guess I could say that, like, now I realize, like, that's the whole thing, is spiritual connection is everything, because it's between, ourselves and our creator. It's between our friends and our family, our animals, you know, everything. There's a spiritual connection between all of us. We're all connected because we're all made of the same energy, so it took a lot for me to get um, from alcoholism to, some kind of understanding. It was a long path.
Yes. And yet I keep thinking about that little girl who had that instinctual desire, to begin with. And I think that unfortunately, um, our culture doesn't encourage that exploration. And my suspicion is that so many of us get lost
Mm,
because that exploration, not only is it not encouraged, in many cases, it's actively discouraged.
yeah.
So I think that's but then again, as we know, we all have this, it's all part of the learning and it's all part of the journey. So coming back to your writing now, do you feel that there is a connection between your mediumship and the way in which you are writing?
Yes, absolutely. I was writing before I became a medium. I wrote a book about addiction, and I had started that almost as soon as I got out of rehab. It was just so rough. I can't tell you, but it was notes jotted down. And I thought, even when I was in there, I was so stunned to see how I had changed within, I spent 2 months there, and I was so terrified to go into that place. I thought my life was over, and then I got there, and I met these very wonderful human beings, and they were other patients. There were other people there trying to get better. They were really the ones who changed my life. And I wrote that book about them. But even in that, there's some discussion of connection to a higher power. I mean, that was a big, big theme in that book as well. But then when I began to, many years later, my husband and I always do our communications together. We learn together. And when Spirit, opened me up in such a way that I could communicate directly, he was always there with me, and we were just wowed by the information we were given. And some of that had to do with, obviously I was learning, oh wow, there's actual, like, there's contact, things that come out of my mouth that are not coming from my mind. And that was really like a stunning and fascinating thing. And so I wanted to write about that. And then I also was hearing about past lives and how we've traveled together before. And I wanted to write about that, and primarily because, well, I was excited about it, and also because I felt such a shift in my own life with that knowledge, knowing that I was connected, whether I acknowledged it or not. Even during the alcoholism years, I mean, I was still connected. It's perspective. Everything's perspective, right? I mean, like you said, the veil had come down, but it was there. I just wasn't able to see through that foggy veil. So once I had that information, I remember saying, like, I want to write about this. I want to make a story out of this, and so that's what I did. And I feel like you know, that's what motivates me. That book was when you and I spoke last. It was called Before We Were Born, and it follows two soulmates into a lifetime. And it starts in the spirit world with them, the discussion about whether they're coming, they're not, and how that lifetime goes. And it follows them, and one of them passes. So there's, the other one learns how to communicate. And so I was able to talk about those things. you know and then it's a broader stroke with bridge jumping. It's more like, it's a little more grounded in what we all know as life on earth, in our different belief systems. But it's always spirit, I think, that makes me want to write.
Well, that kind of ties in with my next question, which is, do you feel that, okay, let me rephrase the question. To what extent do you feel you are being guided as you are writing?
I love that question. um quite a bit. Quite a bit. I do. There's a certain degree of channeling there. I don't know who it is that helps me with my writing, but certainly I can't claim 100% credit for any of these books, because I know I'm very influenced by spirit. And I will often get an idea, not when I'm sitting down in front of my computer, but when I'm, walking along the beach, or I'm out with my dog, or I'm doing something else. And maybe I'm feeling connected and it comes through, but suddenly I'll get a certain sentence and I'll be, I get the shivers up my arms, and I'm like, that's something. I'm going to go home and put that down. And then it goes into something else. You know what I mean? I don't know if
Yeah.
you've had that experience, but yeah, I feel it's going to be interesting when I get to the other side to find out exactly who was helping me, and, to what degree. I'm thankful for it. Whatever it is, I'm thankful.
Well, so am I. And I'm sure that everyone who reads your books is very grateful too. But I like that because it's always a tricky question. And I've asked it of other writers. And some are very cognizant of the fact that they are not the sole creator,
Mhm.
because they are aware of their connection with spirit.
Mhm.
Others are less connected or not at all connected, and can't conceive that there might have been inspiration, which the very word means that there's something from outside that's coming in to
Yeah.
into the mind. And so it's very interesting that you are very aware of that. I thought you might be. That's why I asked the question, because being a medium, I thought you'd be aware
Yes.
if there was a collaboration that was going on with spirit. And this is a concept, again, as old as the hills, because we have the very notion of the muse that comes in and, inspires the writer, inspires the musician. So I'm glad that you were able to talk about that. Okay, so here's another question, which is about imagination and mediumship. So here you are, a medium with a fabulous imagination. So, how did you start to learn to trust that what you get from spirit is more than something that's inside your head? Because as we're learning and developing mediumship, we're always afraid that we're just imagining what we are getting. So here you are with a great imagination. How do you know that something is not coming from your head, but from an external source?
Anna, that is something that I still question. And there are times when I am unsure, particularly if I'm not feeling as connected. My husband and I will sit together, and there are times when I just say, I can't do it. It's just not, the connection is not getting there. I don't know how to explain it. And I'll have to say, it's not going to go anywhere today. And everything feels sort of comes out in stutters almost, because so as I first started to become a medium, so we back up for a moment, I have a very small degree of clairvoyant ability, which is really like I'll get glimpses. And really for me, that's almost, not entirely, but almost during the time when I'm communicating. So in the very beginning, I would be walking through the grocery store or something, and I'd see a person's face. And I'm thinking, what is this? It probably is a spirit that belongs to someone in front of me in line or something like that. But I had no control over it or understanding of where it was coming from. That was really when I opened up, because everything kind of hit me at once. But so just so you have an idea, so that I do have that during mediumship. I'll sometimes get someone's face, or I'll see a place. And I started off by hearing, so it was clairaudience, and then eventually with time they would speak through me. So there are times when it comes out in little, quick phrases, something like that, and I'm like, I'm not sure who I'm talking to, and I'm very careful about, I have a small circle of my spirit friends, and I don't want anybody from anywhere popping in, and so sometimes I just can't make the connection, or something will come and I'm just not 100% sure about it. But there are other times when I don't even think it's based on how well I'm connected. It's almost the person coming through, they will just almost fly through my body. The words come out ba, 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 so fast that you couldn't write them down. So, and it's just indisputable to me, because I could not even think that fast. It's information that's coming, and it's always love. It's always, Kathy, this is a blah, 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 and it's hard to, I'm trying to make something here that you can follow, and it probably sounds silly, but it's just when it happens, there are times like that when it's indisputable. I had a cool example, if you have a minute. Do you want me to give you an example of it?
Yes, please.
All right. So in May, my youngest daughter graduated from college, and her grandmother is Israeli, and she came here for the service, the graduation service, and she brought her new boyfriend that we hadn't met, and he had lost his wife. Now they primarily speak Hebrew. I don't. My husband does, but he really wanted me to do a reading with him, to sit and so we sat down together, and his wife came, and she spoke through me so quickly. I mean, it just came directly to him, and it was a little astonishing how I didn't know him really, not yet. And but it was really, she said things that so my mother-in-law's name is Shula. And so when the spirit first came through, I knew it was a female, and she said, Shoo, shoo. And I said, oh, I think this is going to be for you, Shula, because this is words are coming through, shoo, shoo. And her boyfriend told me later, no, that was my nickname for her. Her name was, I called her Shoo Shoo. And I had no way of knowing that, and that was really cool. And then the next day, he got a phone call from his daughter in Australia, and she said that during the night, her husband had had a dream. He was speaking to the woman who had passed, and she was saying the same things to him that she was saying through me to her husband. It was almost like there was an alignment of that. While I was talking to her, he was tapping in and hearing it somehow in his dream. And I thought that was really cool. So there are some times where you get that confirmation from other people that have nothing to do with you, that really, helps you to understand.
I I do feel that particularly when we first start developing, we are so wanting that validation.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, so I think sometimes it's easier to get that validation when we're starting out, because it's almost like they want us to learn to trust that we're not imagining things.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets more subtle, and the validation isn't as obvious as quickly. And I do think that this is a matter of us learning to trust in our abilities. And so it's a bit like we're given a tricycle, the training wheels are there to begin with, so that it's really easy to confirm, and then it gets harder because, hey, we want you to just start riding this bike now. Forget the training wheels, and
Yeah.
trust, trust. So this is quite a hazy world in a sense. And that's why I was curious about your writing too, because as we look at the different perspectives of each individual in the story, really it's almost like the story is also the story of how we learn to develop connection and trust in something else,
Mm.
and how all of us are at different stages of that journey. And I think you do that in a wonderful and most entertaining and engaging way.
Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you. The book that we are discussing is called Bridge Jumping, and I'm going to be putting a link to it in the description box. Kathy, if people want to find you either for your mediumship or for your writing, how do they do that?
Well, I don't give readings. I don't do mediumship for people. It's really just something I do with my family or friends, or if somebody really needs help, something like that. But you can find me through my website, which is just my full name, which is Kathleen Reddy Dayan, DAYAN.com. And you're welcome to message me. My email is on there. So I do get messages, to my email through the website. Sometimes people just want to reach out and say, hey, I've had this experience. I heard you talking, and it just maybe like what you mentioned a minute ago, like having confirmation from another person of, yeah, that sounds right, but people are welcome to reach out to me. And yeah, that's the best way.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, Anna. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. And I'll be putting a link to the book and to Kathy's website in the description box. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at ancient history of the British Isles. Until then, goodbye.